Vernon Fox, welcome to Dad Edge, man.
Oh, Larry, thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you on, my friend. Hey, we're talking everything fatherhood. So, so let's just dive right in, man. What was your childhood like growing up? I know that you're like the third, man, right? The third Vernon, and it's like a legacy.
I am, man. It's a lineage that I was blessed to kind of be a part of, and man, I really have no complaints in regards to my childhood. I don't take it for granted that I grew up in a home with both of my parents. You know, my parents have been married over 40 years and, just not something that's common in our society today. And man, stability is one word I would say that I felt growing up. Had an amazing example of a father, of a husband in the home. And so it's something I've always tried to model myself after. So not just being named after, Vernon Jr., but really just trying to emulate and walk in his tracks has kind of always been my goal.
You said a couple of key words there, but one was stability, mm-hmm. and you want to emulate. You saw a good example that was emulated to you of a good father and husband. So let's steal from Vernon II. And what did he do?
Man, he was just, you can count on him. You know what I mean? He was faithful. He was, I think when I say stable, like he was the epitome of stability because, I just knew that I could count on him. And not just as a son, but I saw him, be that for my mother. Eventually I had a sister. We were 12 years apart. So forever I was kind of an only child and she came and kind of stole my thunder a little bit. But I just saw him do whatever was necessary to sacrifice for our family, to go out, to provide. He was always there. I was involved in sports, at an early age, was always doing something. And, I never recall him not being there. He was at every practice. He was at every game. And sometimes he even worked out of town. And he'd find a way to always kind of be there and just kind of be that rock.
What did he do for a living?
He was a laborer. So, he actually had a hand in many of the hotels that were originally built on the Strip here in Las Vegas. Some of the companies that he was working with, he was a part of those building projects. And so, I got to see him do that. And he retired really early, man. I think he might have been around 30, when he retired and was able to walk away right around the time I was going off to college. And it was really cool because he was able to come to all of my games there at Fresno State. Wasn't far from Las Vegas. And I remember him just like, shutting everything down so that he can kind of commit to being there and being a part of that process.
I keep hearing about this Strip in Vegas. I never knew that there was one there, but yeah, I keep hearing about it.
It's the only thing people know about Vegas.
Yeah.
Funny story. When I went to college, people asked me, did I like live in a hotel? And I'm like, what? I'm like, no, we got houses just like everywhere else.
Yeah. There's actually subdivisions there, believe it or not. It's not the whole place, right? Or you should really mess with people and be like, yeah, my home was the Stratosphere.
Right. Exactly. And I'll tell them the Luxor. Right. I lived in a big pyramid.
There you go, man. So it sounds like your dad was physically present, right? But I'm really getting this sense from you, man, that your dad was also mentally and emotionally present for you as well. Not just showing up like, hey, I'm at your game, but I keep going back to this word stability. So mentally and emotionally, how did this man show up for you?
You know what? I think in a lot of ways he taught me how to have that balance. My dad's a really, really quiet individual. He's really, really introverted. If you're around him, he's hard to figure out. So most of my friends and people growing up, never knew if my dad liked them or, my girlfriends were afraid of him because he was just kind of really quiet. And that's just his demeanor. But he's the kind of person that when he knows you, he opens up to you. He obviously trusts you and he'll communicate. And we just had that kind of relationship. I remember when I was a teenager, I cut my dad's hair. And so when I'd be cutting his hair, we'd have like these intricate conversations where he kind of, talk to me about life issues and, just about serious conversations we'd have. I always remember we were either cutting hair or it was just he and I having breakfast on Saturday morning after one of my games or something kind of growing up. And I give him a lot of credit, but man, my mom was amazing as well. And so, she's kind of like my best friend. So it was a real, interesting dynamic between the two. They're both very different in terms of personality. But I knew what I could get from my dad in terms of just, like I said, that stability and just nurturing me into being the man that I would eventually become.
Well, and what was their relationship like? Because it sounds like they've been married for 40 plus years. So they're doing a few things right.
Yeah, they gotta be doing something right, man. Yeah. In the culture we live in. Obviously, just like everyone else, man, they had the struggles, and they battled through. I saw them go through every season. Their relationship has always been a great example, even to my wife and I, who have now been married 16 years, we look at my parents as like, that standard. It's like, man, that's kind of what we want, when we get to that point. And, we want the longevity. We want, again, the stability, because I believe not only did my dad provide that for me, he provided it for my mother as well. My sister, we just felt like we had a stable home. And to this day, like, I think part of the reason that keeps us in Las Vegas is because my wife's mother is here. My parents are here. We like being close to that family unit, and it'd be hard to take the grandkids away from them,
That's awesome, man. The cool thing about being raised in an environment like that, man, I've done 700 plus interviews now over 6 years. Yeah. And, we've always, the guests that I've had have always come from one of three camps. Yours one is, hey, my parents got along great. They're still married. It was actually a positive environment. Another camp was, it was okay. My parents kind of existed. There wasn't a whole lot of love, but they weren't really breaking up. And then of course, ones that came from broken homes. But what were some things that you learned from them that you have now implemented into your own relationship? 16 years, man, that's great.
Yeah. I think the cool thing is the level of communication in the relationship that I have with my parents. They've always been open and honest with me. So, they were transparent about struggles. My mom has always kind of, pulled me aside and taught me how to be, the type of husband that she felt like my wife needed. They have an amazing relationship, my mom and my wife. And so, she knows my wife a ton. She probably is around her more than most people. They actually worked together for a long period of time. They both were in the same industry. Obviously, we're seeing them on a regular basis. We work in ministry together at the church. So it's, they're always around each other. And my mom's just been gracious enough to kind of just help train me and to teach me what she knows that a wife needs. And then my dad, again, on the other hand, wasn't just an overt, like, communicative person in terms of like always saying things, but I just watched his actions. Like, his actions spoke louder than his words. And I saw him like live out sacrifice. His whole life has been committed and dedicated to just making sure that we, had a comfortable life, and he would do whatever, to make sure that we were taken care of. And I've watched that. And so when I've had opportunities to, give back to him, and God has put us in that position, man, it felt great. When my dad turned 60, we bought him a Harley, like all tricked out. And that was like one of the best days of my life, like to be able to do that for him.
Dude, what a gift, man. What an amazing gift to give back. I'm curious, what's one thing that your mom taught you that a woman needs?
Wow. So many, but I think one of the things that I've really kind of gravitated towards in these years is really just making sure that I buy into supporting my wife's dreams and passions. Playing in the NFL, I played for almost a decade, and that's a tough life. We were moving to a new city every 2 years. My wife kind of had to put her life on hold. And so, we were constantly on the run, didn't have a say so in where we were living and what we were doing. She just kind of supported me and was there to kind of pick up the pieces when I wasn't around. And, when my career ended, I made an intentional effort to do my best to kind of swap. I wanted her to be able to kind of chase some of her passions. I wanted to, take the kids off of her hands and do whatever I needed to do to support her at home. And then also just to kind of dig in the trenches with her and help her kind of chase after some of her passions that she kind of put on the shelf. And I think a lot of that my mom kind of showed me over time.
So really just being like a rock foundation, kind of the go-to, kind of like the lighthouse, right? Lighthouse in the
as best I can.
Yeah, man. And I know when you're playing in the NFL, or any professional sports, she's got to be the lighthouse for you too. Like you were talking about holding down the fort, you know?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
And I know how crazy that is. I mean, obviously I know it from a distance, but right before COVID hit, I was contacted by the performance coach of the Angels.
Okay.
And he's a podcast listener. And he's like, hey man, he's like, what are your thoughts on flying out and giving a seminar on, work-life integration and marriage and communication and connection with your kids? Because, he's like, our players need it. And at the time, the Angels had just gone through a horrible tragedy where one of their players had overdosed. So the morale was really low. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And we were on probably 4 or 5 Zoom calls planning everything. And he's like, all right, man. He's like, we can fit you in for 3 hours on this day the whole year. And I was like, you guys have the whole year planned? He's like, yeah, pretty much every hour. And I was like, he's like, man, he's like, do you know the life of a professional athlete, especially like baseball? And he went through the schedule. And I was like, that's crazy. Like the travel and the demands. And I mean, obviously the physical, mental demands of the sport itself, but also the demands on your time. And then that taxes relationships, right? So to be able to have that amazing connection with your wife, where she's there for you, you're there for her. What an amazing lessons you learned growing up. Obviously she was there for you as well. And boom, here we are, a decade in the NFL. You and I have one friend in common, and that's Anthony Trucks. And Trucks and I were together once, and he's like, hey man, he's like, you know what NFL really stands for, don't you? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, not for long. Because that's the joke. It. Not for long.
Yeah.
So, but for a decade, man, that's a long period of time. And let's actually shift gears there. As you played professional sports, what were some big mindset lessons that you had to learn? Could be you had to learn them the easy way. Maybe it was the hard way.
It's interesting that you asked that, because I do some things that I share. I do some lives on Instagram. I term them random thoughts. And last night, I shared a live session through my Instagram platform, and it was just a testimony, kind of talking about my draft experience, being that it's NFL draft weekend, and just going back to that entire process and going through it in my head. Like I mentioned, I was able to complete 8 years by the grace of God in the NFL, but I mean, it was rough. I went in undrafted and ended up playing for 4 teams in 8 seasons. So every 2 years I was on a different team, kind of just your average journeyman, just fighting for a roster spot every year. And as I was kind of thinking back over that journey, one of the valuable lessons that I learned was just tremendous perseverance. Like, I mean, what most people don't understand is that while you're sitting home and you're watching the NFL and you're watching the games and, you're playing couch quarterback and all that stuff and yelling at the TV, for most people, it's entertainment. For us out there on the field, it is absolutely like our job. It's our profession. Like, we are fighting for our lives to maintain a job. And it's tricky on your mind, man, if you're not careful. Every single day is a day that could be your last day, on that field, whether it be by injury or just the nature of the business. Like, the opportunity is just taken away. And you really have to have a strong mindset. And I tell people all the time, I do a lot of, coaching as a life coach and, speaker consultant. And I tell people all the time, it really is more about mindset than it is skill set. You really can be less talented than another person, but if you have a stronger mentality and ability to persevere through hard times, you can go further than, that other person who's much more talented. So I think the game really taught me that.
That is a solid lesson. Can you share actually an example? Let's go to an example to where could be in any of those 8 years and, those 4 teams every 2 years, right? To where you're like, man, I just don't know if I can keep going, or what if tomorrow's my last day? And you would get in your head, but then there was a moment where you would get back out of that, be like, nope, refocus, and just break that down for us, how that worked out for you.
Yeah. So my first 2 years were in San Diego. And after, being released from San Diego, I ended up getting signed in Detroit. And so I spent a season in Detroit, which was kind of transitional. I'm still a young player. I'm still learning the business. I'm trying to figure out how to adapt in a new environment. And so I get through that year. And then the next year I go out and I kind of start to understand my role, so I figure out, primarily I'm a special teams guy. And so in my mind, I just made the best of that. I just told myself, if this is the role I'm going to play, I'm going to be the absolute best that I can be at it. I go out, I have a phenomenal year. I was on the Pro Bowl ballots that year. I was named the special teams MVP of the team. All of these great things are happening. And I'm slightly in negotiations with the Lions to kind of renegotiate a new contract. It's the first time I've ever been in the position to negotiate anything. It's 1-year deals every year for me. And so the coach gets fired right in the middle of all of this. And so, I figured still my value's been stabilized. People see and know who I am. Management is still the same. It's just a new coach. And when the new coaches came in, everything that was on the table was just pretty much taken away. So, I went from negotiating a new contract to basically being given a 1-year tender, and my pay was lower than it was the year before. And so, you can only imagine the level of discouragement that sets in a moment like that. You finally feel like, okay, I've proven myself a little bit. I'm kind of getting in a good position. And then that happens, the rug gets pulled out from underneath you. And I didn't understand that. I didn't understand how does that even happen? And I just got a bunch of lessons in how the business works. And I remember sitting at home in that off season, and when I got that phone call and those things were taking place, and I really considered not going back. I really considered maybe it's just time to just hang it up. I was just at a rough patch in my career. Mentally, I didn't feel like I had the fortitude or the mindset to go back and to face that head on. And I really considered, hanging it up. And eventually, I got over myself. I realized that I was still in a blessed position to even be in the position that I was in. I went back, fought through it, ended up getting released. So I went from literally being named the special teams MVP to, 4 to 6 months later, getting released from the team. But what I didn't know on the back end of that was the day I got released, I got claimed off of waivers with the Washington Redskins, got a phone call from Joe Gibbs himself. And he's like, man, this is for us, this is an answered prayer to see you on the waivers. And you're coming over here, you got a job. That was the first time I'd ever been treated or talked to like that. But I would have never known that had I given up. And so just fighting through that moment taught me an amazing lesson. But yeah, man, it was tough at times.
What year was that?
That was in 2007. So okay. Yeah, 2007 that happened.
Got it. And I know you're a big faith guy, right?
Yes, sir.
We have that in common.
Yes,
and were you strong with your faith then?
I was. It really was the probably the anchor that held me together during that time, because I realized I went through a lot in my career. Like not getting drafted was probably the worst but best thing that could have ever happened to me, because I was just this prideful prick, and God humbled me and kind of showed me this isn't about you. And so by that time I kind of really matured in my faith. I was really walking firm. And so I just realized it wasn't about me. And so, whatever direction God was leading, I just trusted him to, really kind of take the reins.
I'm looking back on it now. You think that was like a God wink?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
All of it.
I got you.
To this day, it's still happening, man.
That's cool, man. That is so cool. It always fascinates me, because I know you're right. I love the term couch quarterback, and believe it or not, I don't think I've ever heard that term. And now that I've been doing this for 6 years, and I've interviewed a ton of athletes, and I'm like, man, people have no idea the pressure that you guys are under and the things that go through your mind. And and our buddy Trucks, he told me the same thing. He was just like, man, NFL stands not for long. Like literally, you are fighting for your job and position every day, and there's no empathy, no nothing. Like, yeah, you're gone. Bye, see you. But okay, so talk to me now about your kids. You have a boy and a girl. So you get the opportunity, unlike me, I'm raising all boys, know nothing about girls, but you really get this incredible experience of raising each one, and share what that's like as far as, and you can do one of two things, take one at a time and what it's like raising a son, daughter, or explain the differences and how you go about parenting each one.
Well, first and foremost, it's an amazing blessing. Like we count ourselves to be blessed to have children. I always tell people as way of a testimony, we were told, even before we got married, my wife kind of came to me and was like, I don't know if I can have kids. Like, doctors told me that there's a great chance that, I can't have children. And so we kind of believed God. Our first attempt, didn't work out so well, and we lost our first child. And so it was scary kind of moving forward beyond that point and just having to overcome the fear and just, the fear of failure and the same thing happening. But God blessed us. We were able to have, not just one, but two. We thought we wanted three. But after I had my son, who's the younger, man, I was like, I can't have another one of these guys. Like, he was just a handful. So I was like, all right, we're only graced for two. And, we did what we had to do. So if it happens now, it'll be a tremendous miracle. But my daughter, and they're totally different, first and foremost. My daughter is just really, really compassionate. She is, just amazingly emotional and, tender. And my son can be that way, but then he has this stubborn side to him that they're just different. And I don't know if it's, someone that has girls and boys would understand. So I don't know if that's just the nature of raising a young lady versus raising a young man. But I just know their personalities are totally different. And I kind of treat it like being a coach. I was a coach for 7 years. And I feel like you have to coach every player different. Every player can't be coached, in this cookie cutter system of how you deal with players, because they're going to respond different based upon how you treat them and how you coach them. And it's the same thing with parenting. I've learned, that it doesn't take much with my daughter. If I tell her something one time or I kind of, give her the eyes, she gets it and she responds. My son, it may take a little more. You know what I mean? He's stubborn. I got to kind of will him out of some things and force him to do things that I don't have to with her. But they're uniquely amazing. And so, we just try to cultivate those things, even when they have these quirks that we look at and we say, oh man, that's something that is maybe a character malfunction. We don't look at it that way. I look at that stubbornness in my son and I say, let's cultivate that and make him into an amazing leader because he's not a follower, so little things like that. Obviously we don't have it all figured out. They're 14 and 11. We're still learning. And I know we got some tougher years down the road, when they get a little older. But they're an amazing blessing, man.
I love hearing that, man. Just a reflection there on the stubbornness. My 13-year-old, he's my second born. Same, our kids might as well have been described the exact same. And he's my football player. Okay. And so, but I'm always like, man, you are so competitive and so strong-willed and so stubborn. You piss me off and I love it all at the same time. It's so confusing. Right. Because the cool thing about him is like, he'll stand up for what he believes in, like right, wrong, or indifferent. Like, dude, I'll never forget this. Like he's in 7th grade now. He was in 6th grade. And the prettiest girl in his class, liked him. And they were kind of like dating, which basically means nothing. Like they don't even speak to each other. Like, oh, they like each other, whatever. So, they were kind of dating. Like I said, didn't mean anything. But one day he came home and I was like, hey man, how are things going with so-and-so? I'm not going to say her name. And he was like, yeah, I broke up with her. Just like that. And I was just like, wow. I was like, she's like the girl in your class, right? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, what happened? He goes, she kicked one of my friends in the balls at recess. And I was like, okay. I was like, what does that have to do with you? And literally, this is what he said. I go, what does that have to do with you? He goes, I don't need that in my life.
Oh my gosh. As a 6th grader, huh?
I know. I was like, dude, yes, that's what I'm talking about. Like any other kid, might be like, oh, well, she is the prettiest girl. So I can't really let that go. Right. I don't need that in my life. I was like, man, that's when I love you being stubborn. And then of course, when he's acting out, I'm like, I don't really like the stubbornness, but yeah, man. So let's talk about that for a second. Yeah. How have you been able to cultivate positive leadership out of that strong-willed, sort of stubborn, competitive attitude?
It's been a challenge at times. But one of the things that I really do my best to do is be as transparent as possible. So, I'm not like the old school parent who just tells you, hey, do this just because I say so. Like, I really want to explain to you why I'm asking you to do certain things, why I'm, not allowing you to do certain things. And so we have some pretty deep conversations, and I try to keep the lines of communication open. I really want him to ask questions. I want him to share his emotions with me. And again, I don't want to just turn him off from being who he is because, God created him that way for a reason. And so I want to try my best to try and cultivate it. But what ends up happening sometimes is that because he's so strong-willed, he kind of just wants to do what he wants to do. And so there's this thing where we butt heads over, the lesson that I'm trying to teach him in every moment. And so I just got to be patient with him. I take my time. I talk to him as opposed to me just getting frustrated and just saying, bro, just do what I said. Like I really will take the time to, quote unquote, coach him, and I'll talk him through moments, and I'll let him cry. I'll tell him, hey man, it's okay. As a man, it's all right, man. Sometimes you got to shed those tears, go ahead, feel that emotion, and then let's wrap it up and let's get going again. And so I just try to teach him that. One of the biggest lessons in our house, and it's not just with my son, but with my daughter as well. We have this slogan. We say, foxes never give up. And they understand that, like, we don't quit on anything. And so my thing with him, what I'm really trying to teach him is, if you commit yourself to something, like, bro, see it through, and maybe along the way, you'll realize that everything isn't for you, and you'll make some pivots and some turns in the road. But when you commit to something, finish it. And then we can reevaluate later on whether we want to take a different path. And so sometimes in the middle of things, he doesn't understand that, because he's just like, I'm not feeling this. I don't want to do this. And I'm like, no, because if I let you quit now, you'll be quitting the rest of your life. You'll give yourself a license. You'll quit on your wife. You'll quit on your family. You'll quit on your job every single time it gets difficult. Like, I want you to feel the flame of the fire sometimes. And, I'm not going to bail you out. You got to feel a little bit of that burn, and then you'll learn the lesson in the future. Like, hey, I got to count the cost of these commitments that I'm making. So that's kind of how I treat him. I treat him like a mini adult, honestly, and he responds as such. So it's pretty cool relationship.
I love that, man. I love the slogan too, because that's something like that's an anchor. For kids, it's something easy. Hey man, like when life gets tough, like what do I got? What do I have to fall back on? Cause this, we don't rise to the occasion. We fall back on our training. And if you're building that foundation, hey, foxes don't quit. Like that's just, when the going gets tough, man, that's something that's going to be a huge anchor for him.
Yeah. I want them to teach their children the same.
Yeah, switching gears to your daughter, what is most important to you as a father to raise a strong, confident young lady?
With her, the biggest lesson, I think, and for whatever reason over the last year, and I think maybe it's just the age bracket that she's kind of fallen into, she's 14, she's, a young teenager. She's kind of figuring out what relationships look like, with her friends, and, she's seeing kind of how girls can be and all of this different stuff. My biggest thing with her is I just want her to be who she is. I mean, it's really easy when you're a teenager to kind of be a chameleon, and you want to fit into every atmosphere. You kind of want to blend and be a part of the group. And I'm trying to get her to understand that it's okay to be different. It's okay to stand out, and that people will respect you more when you're actually willing to stand for something, as opposed to just kind of blend in with the group. And so, the peer pressure excuse is just that. Like in our house, one of the other things that I've taught my players when I was a coach, and my kids know it, they get tired of me saying it, is that excuses are justifications for losers. Like, we're not going to justify, being a loser. Like, you just can't make an excuse. And so you always have to find a reason versus an excuse. And so for her, I've just been trying to get her to really be okay being who she is, even if it feels like she's isolated or unaccepted, because she's a special kid, man. She's really talented. She's gifted. She just has a heart for God, a heart for people. And I never want that to be tainted, because people can be mean, people can make you feel invaluable. And so I just really try to make sure that she feels loved, she feels appreciated and valued. And my wife is amazing at doing that with our kids as well. And so we partner together to just try to make them feel special. If no one else, treats them right, they know that we treat them a certain way. And, that's the standard that we want them to set for themselves.
I love that, man. A reason versus an excuse.
Yes, sir.
You got me curious, man. Right, so tell me about that.
Well, for me, I feel like this. Excuses are, again, they're justifications for losers. It's you trying to find an escape route versus a reason. A reason that I was late could have been that my car broke down. That's something that's outside of my control. An excuse why I was late is I woke up late. And so in that, most people will try to find a way to turn their excuse into a reason. And, you can't live life that way. If you just own up to what you can control and then understand that life is going to present you things that you cannot control, then you can separate it right from the beginning. And you don't live by the excuses, which are things that are within your power. But reasons, on the other hand, are sometimes things that you just don't control. So, I talk about this also with my coaching clients. There's a distinct difference between barriers and hurdles. A barrier is something that really is kind of immovable, and you can't control that. They'll show up in your life and you got to find a way to get over them or around them. Hurdles, on the other hand, you can get over a hurdle. You can knock a hurdle down. You can move a hurdle out of the way. So you got to know the difference between things that you can control and things that you can't, because life is going to present you both. And you cannot back away from those moments just because, you've met either one or the other. And just don't give yourself space to make excuses.
What are you doing tomorrow? You want to talk every day? Like,
man, and I think I just do so much of it. It's kind of the staple of who I am and kind of flagship messages. It really just becomes a part. You're just asking all the right questions.
Oh man. Well, I try, man. I try. I always tell my kids, I was like, I don't have many talents in life, but I can ask good questions. I ask deep.
I agree, man. Definitely.
Thank you. So let's move on to, I want to do something here kind of halftime. I want to throw some things out there and more of in a lightning round type of fashion.
Cool.
What's a quote that keeps you grounded, that keeps you centered, something that you live by, take a lot of pride in?
I was exposed to something during my rookie year. Actually, I was playing for the San Diego Chargers, well, the team formerly known as the San Diego Chargers. And the chaplain at that time was a gentleman by the name of Sean Mitchell. He's a pastor in San Diego. And it was right in the middle of like OTAs, training camp, like, that rough moment for me where, I'm the undrafted, 6th-string guy fighting every single day for my life, trying to make the team. And I was sitting in on one of the chapel sessions, and I'll never forget, he said something and I wrote it down and it just became a part of me. Like, I live by it. But what he said in the moment was to work like it all depends on you and pray like it all depends on God. And when he said that, man, it was like, it was a dagger to me, because quintessentially what it said to me was exactly what I just said to you. Control what you can control. And then what you can't control, like, leave it up to God. And I'm just a firm believer in, as scripture says, faith without works is dead. Like, we have a responsibility and we have a part. It's not enough to just say, God, I believe you for this. But no, like, show me you believe me by the work that you're willing to put in to, exercise the faith that you say you have. And in that moment, man, it just woke me up. I was like, because I was going in every day, like, putting so much pressure on myself to control things I couldn't control. Like, I couldn't, you're 6th string, bro. Like, you're going to get one rep or no reps. Like, there are days where you're just not even going to get a look. And so, what do? Okay, well, what I can't control is the reps I get on scout team. Like, I'm going to kill it. I'm over. Drew Brees is on the other side of the ball. Like, kick him off. Like, open some eyes, do something, make a play. And that was just my mindset. Like, it shifted that day. And I live by that every day. I was like, God, I'm just going to control what I can control. I'm just going to work, and just blindly in faith believe that this thing can work out. And sure enough, man, I went from 6th string to 4th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 2nd string. I was starting by the 2nd week of my rookie career, as an undrafted free agent. So, I mean, that's the power of God and just faith.
I love that, man. I actually wrote that quote down.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, man. I don't know where he got it from, but I stole it.
Work like it depends on you and pray like it all depends on God. And I love that.
Yes,
yes. All right. So what does it mean for you to, if you can see my hat, it says live legendary, legacy is forever. What does it mean to you to live legendary?
Man, I think first and foremost, to honor God in all that I do. That is the example I want to set in my home. Like, I just don't believe in my college coach was Pat Hill at Fresno State. And one of the things that he said that I never forgot was, your actions speak so loud, I can barely hear what you're saying. And I try to think about that every single day. So there's another quote, but I try to think about that every single day. Like, for my kids, it's like, I don't want to just tell them, like, live for God, honor God. Like, I want them to see that in my life. So, I'm their example that they get to see with their eyes. So I want them to see me praying. I want my son to see me praying for my wife. I want, my daughter to see me acknowledging my wife in public. And I want my daughter to feel valued and loved, and me not be afraid to show that in front of people, like all of those things. And so, for me, legacy just looks like passing down the legacy of honoring God and putting him first in everything that we do, say, think. And, it requires consistency on a daily basis, and I'm not perfect. They see me mess up too. And then that's the time when I got to come up and say, hey, guys, that wasn't right. Or, hey, let's talk about this and where daddy fell short, and, just understanding what it looks like.
Love that, man. I did write that down, by the way. This is becoming like a quote bomb episode, right? Your actions speak so loud, I can barely hear what you're saying. I love that. And you're right, man. Our kids are watching every single move we're making. All right. I'm going to hit you with one that, this one might hit in the heart, and it's always one of those aha moments. I'm a big fan of Napoleon Hill. And this was a quote that I read in his book, which is, and this is not to go against faith or anything, right? It's just kind of what it is. But the definition of hell is meeting the man that you could have become when you're laying on your deathbed. What is that? What feelings do you get when I say that?
Man, just never maximizing your potential. Like, that's scary to me. I don't have a lot of, like, just as a human being, and I know this makes me like vulnerable and crazy, and it drives my wife crazy. Like, I'm just not scared of much. I'll fall asleep and, forget to turn the alarm on, and my wife wakes up and she's like, the alarm's not on. I'm like, so, what I mean? I'm just like, okay, if someone comes in here, they're going to have problems.
You've seen me tackle people, right?
Right. And so, in the natural, I'm not really fearful of much. But like, the one thing I am afraid of is like failure, or just not maximizing my potential. And so when I hear that quote, it's the first thing I think of is like dying with gifts that lay dormant and that are still inside of me. I think about the parable of the talents, and, when the ruler comes back and he's like, hey, what'd you do with what I gave you? Everyone else is like, hey, I maximized this. I put it to work. I created more. And then the one is like, well, I just went in, hid it away. And he's like, oh, you slothful, lazy servant, give me back what I gave you. Let me give it to someone else. And I just never want God to look at me that way and say, man, you're not using what I gave you. And that's really a conversation I had with my son a few days ago. I was just like, bro, I'm never going to let you not be the best you. Like, we're going to maximize every gift that God put inside of you. And you make a choice on the direction you want your life to go. You don't have to play football or do anything that you think is what we expect of you. But, what we won't let you do is not utilize the gifts that God gave you.
I love that, man. I keep saying that over and over. I think this is the show I've said that the most, but all these quotes and like these statements that you're saying, I'm like, yes, absolutely. As we wrap up here, let's speak to the man right now and I come into contact with these guys every day, and I'm sure you do actually too, being a life coach. But I see men on what I like to call the drift. It's the wash, rinse, repeat. It's the same day. It's the Groundhog Day. It's the same day over and over again. It's the mediocre marriage, but he desperately wishes for that marriage to be better. He just not really sure what to do, what lever to pull. Is it communication? Is it intimacy? Am I serving enough? Am I selfless enough? Could I be more selfish? Telling her what I need, want, desire, all these things. I'm not the most patient, father in the world. I can have a hot temper from time to time, physically, mentally, emotionally, my health is okay, and they just sort of just steady. Right. Yeah. And then they'll get really excited about something. It could be a program. It could be a book. It could be something. And they're like, yes, I love that information and I want to go out and do it. And I'll do it for like a minute. And then I'm like right back to what life was before, right back to where they were. So let's speak to that man for a second. How can we keep that sustainability where a man sees something, he hears something, he's a part of something, he does something, and keeping him engaged, keeping him on the right path? Because even when you're growing, this, right? Playing in the NFL and everything that you've done, when you're growing, it's never a direct line. It is like, oh, I grew and then I grew again. You're growing, but you're constantly getting knocked down too. But how do we keep sustainability?
You know what is it's an amazing question. And I wish I could bottle it up because I would sell it, man, because I think it's one of the issues that most all of us struggle with is consistency. And really when, one of the things that I think personally that I've always tried to figure out is like balance, and that's such an overarching word. When you say balance, it can mean so many things, but it's so many people's issue. It's like, how do I balance all of these things? Like, how do I be the best husband I could be, the best father I could be, the best businessman I could be? And you're juggling all of these things at the same time. And each of them requires you to give a portion of yourself. And what ends up happening in most cases, and I know for myself, one of the things that I struggle with is that I had tunnel vision, is that I would only be great at one thing and then everything else kind of just got the mediocre me. And so, I fell into the same cycle that you're talking about, where it's like, man, this mundane existence of, even when I get to a better place, then all of a sudden I go back to my old habits. I go back to my old thought processes, my old cycle. And one of the things that I've tried to do, and what I would tell anyone, or the advice I would give a gentleman who's feeling like that, the first thing is to know that you're not in it by yourself. Like, because we can feel that we are uniquely challenged and that no one else understands. But so many of us are in that same space, trying to figure it out. And I think that helps us when you know that there's a community of people that are undergoing the same struggles. The Bible even tells us that, like, there are many that are going through the same thing that you're going through. And when we understand that, it gives us a sense of, community and maybe even helps you emotionally. And then the other part of it is just never settle, because I think there's a distinct difference between complacency and contentment. And, contentment is something that Paul talks about in scripture. He says, I know what it is to be content in every season. Like, there have been seasons where I've had a ton, where I've had a little, where I've been happy, I've been sad. Like, I understand. But, then he goes on to say, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. In other words, I can sustain my mentality in all of these seasons and be okay. And that's contentment. That's something that's learned. He says, I learned it. But when you talk about complacency, one of the issues that ends up happening is that we accept less than who we can be. And that's just being complacent. It's like, man, I just settle into this and this is just how it's going to be. And you never, ever have to accept that that's how it's going to be. Like, there's a greater version of you that you can be, but you just got to put the work in. And the consistency comes with the desire, in my opinion. It's like, how bad do you really want it? I can tell you that I want to lose 50 pounds, but if I'm not eating right, I'm not exercising consistently, then it's not going to happen. And even if it does happen, if I don't maintain it, then I'm not going to sustain it. So, it's just like, it's a mentality, it's a mindset. And anything that you do on a consistent basis, like, it becomes a part of who you are. And so it just takes time. But if you stick with it, like, man, it becomes you. I just wrote a devotional that I cannot wait to release to the world, but it's called Faith Habits, 21 Days of Faith. And it's just like ingraining in your mind, like, man, I live by faith every single day. And anything you do, as they say, for 21 days becomes a habit. And I'm just trying to encourage people, like, man, walk in faith and not by sight, like, every single day. And it becomes a part of who you are. So it's the same thing. It's just that consistency comes down to desire.
I love that, man. There you go again. So when does this devotional come out?
Man, right now it is in proofing and layout. So, man, I'm hoping here. Let's see, May, April, May, June. I would hope like June. I would hope June, man. I can let this thing out.
Well, guys, look, keep a lookout for it. Today is June 6th. So it might be out there. And if not, if you're catching this podcast a little bit later, still go check it out. Make sure you check out his devotional. Man, I've really, really enjoyed this. This has been a lot of fun, a lot of amazing quotes, a lot of amazing bombs dropped. And I really appreciate you coming on. What's next for you as far as things that you're working on, things that you're excited about in the next year?
As I mentioned, I actually started kind of tailoring back a little bit on the personal one-on-one coaching. I think just the demand has been difficult. And so, I've been moving into some group coaching models with coaching. A lot of what I do is culture leadership and program development for businesses and, athletic teams and coaching staffs and those things. So I'm really kind of building that up. But at the same time, just as an ordained, licensed minister of the gospel, man, I'm always evangelizing and pushing the word. So, ironically, my first book that'll be released is a devotional. I've been working on a, self-help book called The 3 P's to Success for like 3 years. And I just jumped out of the way and said, man, I just want to do God's will first. So, man, that's really what it's about. I've learned to stop making plans and just try to follow God's lead. Every time I try to, take the lead, I mess it up. So, whatever his will is concerning me and my wife and my family, man, we're wide open.
Well, man, literally that goes back to your quote of work like it depends on you and pray like it depends on God, right?
Yes, sir.
So, yeah. Well, gentlemen, that's all we got time for today. Vernon, I have thoroughly enjoyed this show. You've energized me, and I love hearing about your faith, how you grew up, how you go about marriage, how you go about raising a daughter, how you go about raising a son. And this has been thoroughly enjoyable, and I appreciate you coming on.
Man, Larry, thank you so much, man. I likewise have enjoyed this. It's been a blessing.
You bet, my friend. Hey, gentlemen, this is June 6th. And for all the show notes, head on over to gooddadproject.com/321. Yes, that's it. 321. gooddadproject.com/321. Vernon, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Yes, sir. God bless you.
God bless you. Gentlemen, go out and live legendary. Take care.